Now I'm going to introduce you to another one of our children, whose name is Ryan. What you're going to see is a clip of Ryan about 1.5 years after he began RDI. And he's already progressed from stage 1 to stage 6. Now, Ryan, still in this scene, doesn't have a full command of language. His language is still somewhat delayed. However, his communication is already highly effective. He doesn't have all the words, but what you're going to see is his nonverbal communication is already functioning at a normal level, and his use of declarative communication, or communication for experience sharing, is almost 100% of what he does. So even though Ryan doesn't have the quantity of words or language, his quality of language and communication is so great that by this stage, Ryan was already making friendships and was already seen as one of the most popular children of his typical first grade classroom. As you watch this clip, I want you to observe several things. First, how much of the work Ryan does to maintain the mood with his mother, to make sure his mother is ready and that she's enjoying herself, and to maintain enthusiasm. Now, the other thing we're going to be watching is how Ryan handles the breakdown in their coordination. What you're going to see is that they're going to be running together and falling into beanbag chairs, holding hands. Now, after a few successes, they're going to have to do this without holding hands, which is going to be somewhat difficult for Ryan. But you're going to see him adjust really quickly. As soon as he's adjusted to that, Mom's going to add one more breakdown. What she's going to do is, without warning, run with him, not holding hands, and right before she reaches the pile of beanbags, she's going to abruptly just stop without any warning. Now, what we want to see here is whether Ryan not only can adjust his actions to stay with his mother, but also whether he takes responsibility rather than blaming her for this breakdown.
The same thing. Blue one. And then. Go. Yes. Help me up. Oh, it hurt. Did you get hurt? Yeah. I get the pedal there. You get hurt on the phone? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, go.
In the next scene, you're going to see that Ryan's mom is going to stop holding his hand. She's going to make the requirement for regulation more complex, because obviously it's easier to stay coordinated when you're holding hands. And you're going to see that initially Ryan doesn't quite get it. But after a couple of times, he's going to make adjustments on his own and be able to stay coordinated with his mother. Now that Ryan has mastered this level of complexity, Mom is going to add an unexpected turn in this activity. What she's going to do, and you're going to see, is she's going to start out just like they've been, but as she gets right up to the beanbags, as she's about a foot away, she's going to abruptly stop rather than falling into the beanbags. And of course here, what we want to see are two things. One, does Ryan become aware of this, and does he adapt and regulate his actions to stay coordinated? And two, does he take responsibility when he can't do it? In other words, initially we don't expect him to be coordinated with Mother. We expect him to keep going in his expected way. The question becomes, how does he react? Does he blame his mother, or does he realize that it's his job to keep his eyes on her while they're moving towards their goal? just heard Ryan say is, "Whoops, I'm sorry." Now, Ryan isn't feeling bad about himself. He's not feeling incompetent. So this "I'm sorry" is a sincere repair action. What he's saying in the "I'm sorry," because he doesn't have the words yet, remember, he has the concept without the words yet, is, look, I'm supposed to be the one watching and staying close to you. And I'm sorry that I didn't do my part of the partnership. What's amazing is you can see the concept, the thinking, precedes the language. Otherwise, the language just has a rote meaning. It really doesn't have any conceptual background to it.
What? What are you sorry about? What happened? What am I doing? What did I do? Stop! Come on, start again. Okay, on 3.
So Ryan didn't succeed in coordinating with his mother. He makes the repair, and then what you'll see is that he's ready to go again. He doesn't feel like he's failed. He doesn't feel like it's hopeless. He realizes from all of his past experiences now, from the last 18 months, that he's going to discover a way to be successful. He has developed what we call a sense of competence now. And so you're going to see him just game to try it again until he succeeds.
1, 2, 3, go!
Now, what you're seeing is that Ryan has discovered how to stay coordinated with his mother. He didn't receive any instruction, no one taught him this, but through his own efforts, his own problem solving, he figured out that he's got to be able to watch his mother and at the same time move towards the goal. And you're going to see now that he has triumphed.
One more time, one more time, one more time.
You can really get a sense of Ryan's excitement and his enthusiasm now as he's conquered this task. And you can see the payoff for him, right? The motivation wasn't that he fell on beanbag chairs. That made no difference whether it was beanbag chairs or some other activity. The real payoff was that he had solved this problem. That's what we mean by the motivation for competence. He had moved into an unknown area, an area of productive uncertainty, and through his thinking and problem-solving ability, he had managed to solve it. There's no motivation that's as powerful for us as when we feel competent, when we've mastered a challenge and are ready for the next one. Stage 7 really initiates a big change in our emphasis. You notice we've moved from emotion sharing to referencing, to coordinating, to unexpected changes, to putting that all together. Now we're introducing a new element to this mix, which is becoming aware of yourself and also then learning how you impact other people. I often talk to parents who complain that their children in the autism spectrum continue to do things that irritate other people or hurt their feelings. Parents will often say to me that they ask the child, "Don't you see how this makes me feel? Why do you keep doing this?" And the child looks at them like they have no idea what they're talking about. Well, the reality is they have no idea what they're talking about, because until we move to stage 7, we haven't a clue that we are active, conscious agents who impact people's emotional states. It's actually a much more complex process than we recognize. Let's talk about some of the things that we do to develop this. First thing is we have to develop a sense of self. People on the autism spectrum have a very difficult time understanding that they have a unique self, largely because the sense of self develops out of episodic memory, out of your own experiences, where you catalog changes, what you learned, how you grew, how you differed from others, how you were similar. If you don't have that catalog of episodic memories, you're not going to have much of a self. So we may start with things like a catalog of personal preferences and do it in relative degrees. So for example, Well, I really like Burger King hamburgers, but I like Wendy's hamburgers just a little bit more. And my favorite ones come from Fuddruckers. Right? We start setting up degrees of preference or reactions, whether those are positive or negative, so that the child realizes they have a unique set of responses to the environment. To do that, we also have to contrast and compare their preferences to those of other people around them, like family members. The child has to become aware that they are a separate entity from other people in their family. So the child might like hamburgers, mom might dislike them. And that doesn't mean that either of them is right or wrong. So we want to build an awareness of self in contrast to others. Similar light, we're going to help the child develop an awareness that they may have a specific role in the family. Well, every child is going to be a son or a daughter. But they also might be a brother and sister. They might be a younger or an older brother and sister. They may also be a grandson or a granddaughter. And each of those roles is important, and it's part of who they are. Now, as we're building up self, we're also building up episodic memories. And we want to emphasize memories of prior actions, prior events, and teach the child to reflect, to go back and think about those prior episodes in their life and extract meaning from them. We want to take that also and move it into the present. So in stage 7, we're also going to focus on what we call self-narration and self-evaluation. That's a whole different track of language and communication, which we call communication with the self. And it is an essential thing for self-regulation. If you're not narrating to yourself what you're doing, if you're not evaluating your actions, how can you possibly change them? So we're going to practice narration and evaluation, and we're going to model it as well. The next step entails making sure that children learn that their decisions about their actions are related to specific consequences. Again, we take that for granted, and we assume that a child who may have, high IQ or academic ability is already doing that, but it's far from the case. Again, it's a different type of intelligence where we relate what we want to do with what the potential consequences of those decisions are. Now, as we become more involved and more complex in our objectives, we're going to start developing memories where the child's actions created a positive change in another person's feelings. You may say, why do we start with a positive change rather than a negative change? Often we have children who are doing a lot of negative things to make people feel bad. Well, the answer is that nobody wants to begin by learning all the screw-ups that they do or the mistakes they do or how they hurt other people. That's an awful learning setting. So what we're going to do is begin by teaching the child to remember the relationship between actions they take and how those actions cause a positive change in someone else's emotional state. Only then, when that's built, are we going to start to practice situations where the child's actions create a negative change in another person's feelings. Because remember, we're not interested in saying an action is related to a feeling. We want that child to learn that a prior action they take has made a change in someone's feeling from one state to another. You have to be able to be aware of the change. As a final step, the child's going to learn to keep track of the actions they take and the consequences of those actions in daily life. So you can see it's a very complex stage. We don't expect anyone to go through this in a short period of time. Yet, of course, like all the other stages, it's critical. It's critical for that person, for that child, to then be able to independently take responsibility for relationships. And we see it as a critical step before developing first peer friendships.